The crystal champagne flute felt cold against Audrey's skin, a stark contrast to the warmth radiating from the $100,000 gown that clung to her figure. She was Mrs. Grant Covington. The wedding had been a fairy tale, a storybook romance splashed across society magazines. But what no one knew was that the fairy tale would end before the sun rose again. In just a few hours, in the opulent privacy of their penthouse suite, a single, carelessly hidden cell phone would shatter the illusion. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't scream. She would smile. And in that silent moment, a plan for payback would be born, a revenge so meticulous and so public it would not only destroy his reputation, but dismantle his entire empire in front of the world. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the manicured lawns of the Covington estate, filtering through the ancient oak trees as if nature itself had conspired to bless the union of Audrey Jensen and Grant Covington. To the 500 guests sipping vintage champagne and nibbling on caviar, it was the wedding of the decade. Grant, the impossibly handsome heir to the Covington Development's fortune, looked every bit the prince, his smile as brilliant as the diamond cufflinks on his bespoke tuxedo. And Audrey, his bride, was ethereal. In her custom Vera Wang gown, she was the embodiment of grace and elegance. Her journey from a modest middle-class upbringing to this pinnacle of society was a story whispered with a mixture of envy and admiration. She wasn't just a pretty face. She was a brilliant architectural prodigy who had graduated top of her class from MIT. It was her sharp mind and quiet confidence that had first captivated Grant at a charity gala 2 years ago. "To my beautiful, brilliant wife." Grant toasted his voice, resonating with practiced sincerity across the sea of elegantly dressed guests. "Audrey, you are my foundation, my blueprint for happiness. With you by my side, we won't just build skyscrapers, we will build an empire." The crowd erupted in applause. Audrey smiled, her heart swelling with a genuine love she believed was reciprocated. She had put her own promising career on hold, dedicating the last year to supporting Grant's bid to take over as CEO of his family's company. She had poured her innovative ideas and late-night hours into his cornerstone project, the Ethelgard Arcology, a revolutionary sustainable urban development that was meant to be his masterpiece. Their masterpiece. The reception was a blur of congratulations, air kisses, and the flash of photographers' bulbs. Old Mr. Covington, Grant's formidable father, gave her a curt but approving nod. "You keep him focused, young lady." He'd grumbled, a rare compliment from the stoic patriarch. Finally, long after the last guest had departed and the fireworks had faded from the night sky, Grant swept her into his arms and carried her over the threshold of their sprawling penthouse apartment overlooking the city. The rooms were filled with white roses, the air thick with the promise of a perfect life just beginning. "Tired, Mrs. Covington?" Grant murmured, his lips tracing a path along her collarbone. "Not in the slightest," she whispered back, her body alight with anticipation. He chuckled, a low, rich sound. "I need to take a quick shower wash off the day. Don't go anywhere." He winked and disappeared into the cavernous master bathroom. Left alone in the magnificent bedroom, Audrey felt a wave of pure, unadulterated happiness wash over her. She slipped out of her heavy gown, letting it pool like a cloud of white silk on the floor. Clad in a simple satin robe, she wandered over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the glittering city lights. This was her home now. This was her future. Her gaze drifted to Grant's discarded tuxedo jacket, slung carelessly over a valet chair. A fond smile touched her lips. He was always a little messy, a charming flaw in his otherwise perfect facade. She walked over to hang it up properly, her fingers brushing against the fine wool. That's when she felt it a hard rectangular object in the inside pocket. It wasn't his usual phone. She knew the familiar weight and shape of that one. Curiosity piqued, she reached inside and pulled out a slim, unfamiliar burner phone. It was cheap disposable, the kind used for secrets. A cold knot of unease began to form in her stomach. Why would Grant, a man who owned the latest model of every high-end gadget, have this? Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed the power button. There was no password. The screen lit up, displaying a string of recent messages. The sender was listed only as B. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. With a deep, steadying breath, she opened the thread. B, is the show over? I'm bored. Grant almost, playing the part of the devoted husband. You'd be proud. B, just make sure she doesn't suspect anything. My father will pull his support if this gets messy before the Ethelgard contract is signed. Audrey's breath hitched. She scrolled up, her blood turning to ice. Grant. Don't worry. Audrey is completely in the dark. She thinks the design is our project. She has no idea her little pet project from MIT is about to make me CEO and us a fortune. B. And after you secure the contract. What about your sweet, brilliant wife? The final message sent just an hour ago during their reception felt like a physical blow. Grant. She'll be a rich divorcee. A necessary and very temporary inconvenience. I'll see you tomorrow at the usual place. The real celebration starts then. The room began to spin. Every word, every promise, every shared laugh from the past 2 years replayed in her mind, now tainted, twisted into grotesque lies. The love she felt was a sham. The partnership was a theft. She wasn't his foundation. She was a stepping stone to be discarded. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had systematically stolen her intellectual property, the very soul of her professional passion, and was planning to cast her aside once it had served its purpose. The sound of the shower turning off jolted her from her stupor. He would be out any second. Panic warred with a sudden chilling clarity. Crying wouldn't help. Screaming would only give him the satisfaction of her pain and the upper hand. He thought she was a naive girl he could easily manipulate. He was about to learn how wrong he was. With movements that felt unnaturally calm, she took a photo of the entire message thread with her own phone, ensuring every damning word was captured. She then deleted the photo from the burner phone's gallery, wiped her fingerprints from its surface, and slipped it back into the jacket pocket, placing it exactly as she had found it. When Grant emerged from the bathroom, a towel slung low on his hips, a self-satisfied smirk on his face, he found Audrey sitting on the edge of the bed, a serene smile on her face. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice laced with the faux concern of a predator. She looked up at him, her eyes, which just moments ago had seen the wreckage of her life, were now clear and steady. The architect in her, the part that saw structures and systems that understood stress points and weaknesses, took over. He had built a facade of lies around her, and she, the master designer, would be the one to bring it all crashing down. "Everything is perfect," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I was just thinking about our future, our empire." He had no idea that on their wedding night, his new wife wasn't planning their life together. She was drawing up the blueprints for his destruction. The first morning of a marriage should be filled with languid affection and whispered promises. For Audrey, it was the first day of a covert war. She woke before Grant, the sun streaking across the silk sheets of their ridiculously large bed. For a disoriented second, the horror of the previous night felt like a nightmare, but the cold, hard certainty that settled in her chest was all too real. She watched him sleep, the handsome face, the relaxed brow. It was the face of a man utterly convinced of his own invincibility. A wave of revulsion so potent it was almost nauseating washed over her. She had loved this man, trusted him with her heart, and worse, with her dreams. The betrayal wasn't just in the affair. It was in the calculated theft of her life's work. The Ethelgard arcology wasn't just a project. It was her thesis, her passion, a design she had spent years perfecting, a vision for a better way of living. And he was going to use it as a prop in his power play, then discard her like scaffolding from a finished building. Quietly, she slipped out of bed. In the guest bathroom, she stared at her reflection. The woman looking back was pale, her eyes shadowed with a pain so deep it felt bottomless. But beneath the pain, a flinty resolve was hardening. He expected tears. He expected a dramatic confrontation, followed by a tearful, messy divorce, where he, with his army of Covington lawyers, would control the narrative and the settlement. She would give him none of it. She would play the part he had cast for her, the adoring, slightly naive bride, blinded by love and wealth. Her performance had to be flawless. When she returned to the bedroom with 2 cups of coffee, Grant was just stirring. He stretched luxuriously, a smug grin spreading across his face as he saw her. "Good morning, Mrs. Covington," he purred, pulling her toward him. "Did you sleep well?" She forced a shy smile, allowing him to kiss her. It felt like pressing her lips to cold marble. "Like a dream." She lied, her voice soft. "I'm still not sure any of this is real." "Oh, it's real," he said, taking the coffee. "And it's only the beginning." The days that followed turned into a masterclass in deception. Audrey meticulously constructed her new persona. She was attentive, affectionate, and blissfully ignorant. She asked about his day, listened with feigned interest as he spoke of his progress on the Ethelgard project, even offering small, helpful suggestions that were just clever enough to seem supportive, but not so brilliant as to arouse suspicion. Each time he unknowingly took one of her ideas and claimed it as his own, a piece of her rage solidified into cold, hard fuel. Their life was a whirlwind of social obligations. Dinners with business partners, charity galas, weekend trips to the Hamptons. At every event, Audrey was the perfect accessory on his arm. She charmed his father, who seemed to be softening toward her. She engaged in vapid conversations with other society wives, learning to read the subtle currents of power and gossip that flowed through their elite circle. Through it all, she was watching Grant. She studied him not as a wife, but as an analyst studying a target. She learned his routines, his passwords, the tells that signaled his lies. A slight twitch in his jaw, the way he'd tap his fingers when he was impatient. She noted the late meetings that always seemed to happen on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the vague business trips that left him energized but secretive. These were his liaisons with B. One evening, about a month after the wedding, Grant was preparing for a gala. Audrey was adjusting his tie, her fingers nimble, her expression one of wifely devotion. "You seem a bit distracted tonight, darling," she said lightly. "Everything all right with the Ethelgard presentation?" He looked down at her, a flicker of something annoyance, suspicion in his eyes, before it was masked by his usual charm. "Everything's perfect. Just a lot on my mind. The city council presentation is in 2 months. It has to be flawless." "I know you'll be brilliant," she said, smoothing his lapel. "After all, it's your vision." The lie tasted like ash in her mouth, but his pleased, preening response was her reward. He bought it. He bought it all. Her biggest challenge was hiding her own work. While Grant was at his late meetings, Audrey was in her small, locked home office, a room he dismissed as her hobby space. On a new encrypted laptop purchased with cash, she was secretly rebuilding her case. She compiled the original digital blueprints of her Ethelgard designs, complete with metadata and timestamps that predated her relationship with Grant by years. She documented every suggestion she had made to him, cross-referencing them with his updated project files, which she would periodically copy from his home computer using a keylogger she'd installed. One night, while sifting through copied files from his laptop, she found what she was looking for: the identity of Bianca Shaw. The name hit her like a punch to the gut. Bianca was the daughter of Franklin Shaw, the head of Shaw Enterprises, Covington's fiercest competitor. It wasn't just a sordid affair. It was a failed corporate maneuver. Grant wasn't just a cheater. He was a fool. He had likely been trying to orchestrate a merger or a partnership through Bianca, and when her father refused, he was left with nothing but a messy affair and a desperate need for a win. The Ethelgard project wasn't just for his ego. It was to save him from a catastrophic business failure. The knowledge was empowering. Grant wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a cornered, desperate man cloaked in arrogance, and cornered men make mistakes. She closed the laptop, her expression grim. The mask she wore was growing heavier by the day. There were moments late at night when the crushing weight of her reality threatened to suffocate her. The loneliness was a physical ache. She had no one to confide in, no one to share this monstrous secret with. But then she would picture Grant's smug face on the day of his big presentation, and her resolve would harden like steel. He had underestimated her. He thought she was just a part of his design. He had no idea she was the architect of his downfall. Audrey's life became a study in duality. By day, she was the serene, supportive Mrs. Covington, selecting floral arrangements and approving dinner menus. By night, after Grant was asleep, breathing the deep, untroubled breaths of a man with no conscience, she became a forensic investigator in her own home. Her small office, once a sanctuary for creative thought, was now her war room. Her first priority was securing irrefutable proof of her ownership of the Ethelgard designs. The original files from her time at MIT were a start, but she needed more. She needed to prove a pattern of theft that was recent and ongoing. The keylogger she'd installed on Grant's home office computer was a gold mine. Every evening, it would email her a report of his activity. She saw him renaming her files, removing her watermarks, and forwarding drafts to his team at Covington Developments under his own name. He was arrogant and sloppy, so confident in her ignorance that he barely bothered to cover his tracks on his personal machine. She meticulously downloaded every file, every email, and stored them on an encrypted solid-state drive she kept in a small safe hidden behind a false wall panel in her closet, a detail she had personally designed into the apartment's renovation plans, a secret place for her valuables that Grant had never even known existed. Her investigation soon expanded beyond Grant's professional malfeasance. She needed to understand the full scope of his personal betrayal. Hacking into his personal email and social media was surprisingly easy. He used the same password for everything Covington CEO1. The arrogance was breathtaking. There she found a treasure trove of his life with Bianca Shaw. Photos from secret getaways to the Caribbean, dinner reservations at Michelin-starred restaurants for nights he claimed to be working late, and sickeningly sweet email exchanges that mirrored the exact words he had once used with her. The digital trail painted a vivid picture of their 2-year affair. They had started seeing each other just a few months after she and Grant began dating. He had been playing them both, but it was in his financial records that she found his greatest vulnerability. Grant lived a life of extreme excess, far beyond even what his generous trust fund provided. He had made a series of disastrous private investments in volatile tech startups, losing millions. He was leveraged to the hilt using Covington stock as collateral for personal loans. The company itself, she discovered after carefully accessing shareholder reports, was in a precarious position. His father, the old-school patriarch, had been conservative, but Grant, in his role as COO, had pushed the company into risky, high-cost ventures that had yet to pay off. The Ethelgard arcology wasn't just a vanity project to secure the CEO position. It was a lifeline. The city contract was worth billions and would inject the capital needed to save both the company and his own personal finances from utter collapse. Without it, the Covington empire was little more than a house of cards. This knowledge changed everything. Her revenge could be more than just personal humiliation. It could be total annihilation. One afternoon, while Grant was out, Audrey staged a small accident. She spilled a glass of water on her personal laptop, the one Grant knew about, frying it completely. She put on a convincing show of distress when he came home. "Oh, Grant, I'm so sorry. All my files, my old portfolio, it's all gone," she lamented, feigning tears. He was dismissive, almost condescendingly so. "Don't worry about it, darling. It's just a computer. I'll buy you a new one. You don't need that old college stuff anymore anyway. You're a Covington now." His words, meant to be comforting, were a chilling confirmation of his mindset. Her past, her work, her identity. He saw it all as disposable. It was the final push she needed. She was no longer just a victim seeking justice. She was an executioner planning a sentence. With her official computer gone, no one would question why she wasn't working on any personal projects. It gave her the perfect cover. The new encrypted laptop, her real workstation, became her weapon. She began to organize the data she had collected, creating a detailed timeline of Grant's deceit. She compiled a dossier that included 1. The original Ethelgard design files with verifiable MIT timestamps. 2. A log of every stolen idea, complete with dates she suggested them and dates Grant incorporated them into his presentation. 3. The complete text history from the burner phone. 4. Emails and photos confirming the timeline and nature of his affair with Bianca Shaw. 5. A comprehensive analysis of Grant's and Covington Development's dire financial situation, highlighting their dependency on the Ethelgard contract. She worked with the cold precision of an architect designing a structure, only this time she was building a prison of evidence around Grant Covington. Each piece of data was a brick, each email a line of mortar. Soon the walls would be too high for him to climb. She just had to choose the right moment to seal him inside. Audrey knew the identity of B was Bianca Shaw, but she needed to understand the why. Why would the daughter of their biggest rival engage in a clandestine affair with Grant? The pieces didn't quite fit. Franklin Shaw was a notoriously shrewd and ruthless businessman who despised the Covingtons particularly, Grant, whom he openly called a pampered fool. An alliance seemed counterintuitive. Digging into Bianca became Audrey's new focus. Publicly, Bianca was a socialite and the VP of marketing at Shaw Enterprises, a title many considered ceremonial. She was known for her sharp style, sharper tongue, and a string of high-profile but short-lived relationships. Audrey combed through social media gossip columns and financial news archives, piecing together a profile of a woman desperate to prove she was more than just a pretty face with a powerful father. The key came from an obscure article in a business journal about a failed hostile takeover bid. Shaw Enterprises had attempted against a smaller tech firm 2 years prior. The article mentioned Bianca had championed the deal, which ended up being a public and costly failure for the company. Her father had been furious, and according to anonymous sources had sidelined her from all major corporate decisions ever since. Suddenly, the affair with Grant made a twisted kind of sense. It wasn't about love. It was a power play for both of them. Grant desperate to prove himself to his own father, and Bianca desperate to regain the respect of hers. Audrey theorized that their original plan was likely a secret merger, a shocking union of the two rival dynasties. Grant would get the Covington CEO chair. Bianca would get a major seat at the new company's table, and they would both present the deal to their fathers as a fait accompli. But the burner phone texts indicated that Franklin Shaw had refused to play along. "My father will pull his support if this gets messy," Bianca had written. This meant Franklin knew something was going on, but his support was conditional, and evidently had been withdrawn. Grant and Bianca's grand plan had imploded, leaving them with nothing but a messy affair and 2 stalled careers. Grant's theft of the Ethelgard project was his desperate Plan B. To confirm her theory, Audrey needed to get closer to the Shaw's world. She remembered a name from a gala guest list, Brenda Lang, a notorious city gossip who was on the board of several charities with Bianca's mother. Audrey engineered a chance encounter at a high-end department store. Putting on her most charming and naive newlywed persona, Audrey struck up a conversation with Brenda. She gushed about her new life, her wonderful husband, and how she was so eager to get more involved in the city's philanthropic scene. Brenda, flattered and eager for a new disciple, lapped it up. Within 20 minutes, Audrey had secured an invitation to a private charity luncheon Brenda was hosting the following week, an event Bianca was scheduled to attend. The day of the luncheon, Audrey chose her outfit carefully, a demure but expensive dress projecting an image of quiet wealth and harmlessness. When she saw Bianca across the room, she felt a jolt of pure loathing. Bianca was exactly as she appeared in photos, flawlessly beautiful with a predatory glint in her eyes. Audrey played her part to perfection. She waited for a moment when Bianca was holding court with a group of women complaining loudly about a cancelled trip to Monaco. Audrey approached with a sympathetic smile. "That's such a shame, Bianca," she said, her voice dripping with sincerity. "Grant and I were hoping to go to the Grand Prix next year. He's been so buried in work with the Ethelgard project. He deserves a break." She watched as Bianca's smile tightened infinitesimally at the mention of the project. A flicker of possession of anger crossed her face before it was smoothed away. "The Ethelgard," Bianca said, her tone dismissive, but her eyes sharp. "Yes, I've heard about Grant's ambitious little venture. Franklin thinks it's a pipe dream." "Oh, I think you'll be surprised," Audrey replied sweetly. "Grant is pouring his entire soul into it. He says it's the most important work of his life. It's truly his vision." She emphasized the word his, holding Bianca's gaze for a fraction of a second too long. It was a calculated risk, a tiny crack in her facade, to see if Bianca would react. Bianca's eyes narrowed. She saw Audrey not as a rival, but as an idiot, a clueless wife who was simply parroting her husband's lines. "Well," Bianca said with a condescending smirk, "a man's vision is only as good as the foundation it's built on. Let's hope his isn't built on sand." The veiled threat was unmistakable. Bianca was still possessive of the project, still saw it as her ticket back to power. She had no idea that the foundation she was sneering at was the very woman she was talking to. Audrey left the luncheon with everything she needed. The affair wasn't just a side piece. Bianca was an active, if resentful, co-conspirator in the theft. This made the web of deceit far more tangled and far more damning. The downfall wouldn't just be Grant's. It would take Bianca down with him. The thought brought a grim smile to Audrey's face. The scope of her payback had just doubled. Audrey knew that possessing the truth was one thing. Deploying it for maximum impact was another entirely. A messy divorce proceeding would see her evidence buried in legal motions and non-disclosure agreements. Grant's army of lawyers would paint her as a scorned, hysterical wife. She needed to control the narrative, and to do that, she had to take the story public before Grant ever knew what hit him. This meant she needed allies. Her first target was the media. She spent a week researching the city's top investigative journalists, looking for someone with a reputation for integrity, tenacity, and a flair for exposing corporate corruption. She found her in Victoria Finch, a Pulitzer-nominated reporter for the online news outlet, The Sentinel. Finch was known for her meticulously researched high-impact stories that had toppled politicians and CEOs alike. She was famously unreachable, protected by layers of editors and assistants. Audrey created a new anonymous email address and sent a single cryptic message to Finch's publicly listed contact. Subject: The flawed blueprint of Covington developments. Ms. Finch, you build stories. I design buildings. The foundation of Grant Covington's upcoming Ethelgard arcology project is rotten with fraud, intellectual property theft, and corporate malfeasance. I have the blueprints to prove it. If you are interested in a story that will redefine the city's skyline and dismantle an empire, I will contact you again in 48 hours with instructions. It was a gamble. The message could be dismissed as the ramblings of a disgruntled employee. But Audrey had tailored the language to appeal to a journalist's ego and curiosity. 47 hours later, a reply appeared in her inbox from a Proton mail address. It contained a single word: intrigued. Audrey arranged a meeting at a discreet, little-used library on the other side of town. She arrived disguised in a wig, glasses, and a plain trench coat. Victoria Finch was sharp with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through Audrey's disguise. She was skeptical, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Without a word, Audrey slid a simple, non-networked tablet across the table. On it was a curated selection of the evidence, just enough to prove her claims without revealing her identity. She showed Finch the burner phone texts, the side-by-side comparison of her original MIT designs, and Grant's finalized presentation, and a summary of the Covington financial crisis. Finch scrolled through the files, her professional skepticism slowly melting away, replaced by a glint of predatory excitement. "This is dynamite," she breathed, looking up at Audrey. "Who are you?" "I'm the architect he stole it from," Audrey said, her voice low and steady. "And I'm also his wife." Victoria Finch's eyes widened. The story had just gone from a corporate exposé to a human drama of the highest order. "What do you want?" "I want you to break this story." "But not now," Audrey instructed. "It has to be timed perfectly. It has to happen live during the public unveiling of the Ethelgard project in 6 weeks. I want him to be at the absolute peak of his supposed triumph when the truth comes out. Finch leaned back, a slow smile spreading across her face. "You don't just want justice," she said. "You want a demolition." "He's a developer," Audrey replied coldly. "He should understand the term." With Finch on board, Audrey moved to her next, even riskier alliance. Simply exposing Grant would hurt him, but it wouldn't necessarily stop the project. Covington Developments might just replace him and proceed with her stolen designs. She needed to reclaim her work. To do that, she had to get it into the hands of a competitor before Grant's unveiling. She researched every major development firm in the region, dismissing Shaw Enterprises immediately. She finally settled on Anderson Realty Group, a newer innovative firm, run by Cole Anderson. Anderson had a reputation for being ethical, brilliant, and a champion of sustainable design. He was the antithesis of Grant Covington. Again, using an anonymous email, she requested a meeting with Anderson, attaching a single, stunningly rendered image of a futuristic, self-sustaining residential tower, a piece of the Ethelgard design Grant had never even seen. The meeting took place in Anderson's sleek, minimalist office. Cole Anderson was in his early 40s with a calm, focused energy. Audrey, once again in a different disguise, didn't reveal her identity. She presented herself as an independent architect, looking for a partner to bring a major project to life. She laid out her complete original vision for the Ethelgard arcology, far beyond the stolen pieces Grant possessed. She explained its zero-carbon footprint systems, its integrated community farming, its revolutionary water recycling, the soul of the project that Grant had been too ignorant to understand or steal. Cole listened intently, his eyes lighting up with genuine excitement. "This is groundbreaking and cool," he said, looking over the blueprints. "This isn't just a building, it's a new paradigm. Why haven't you brought this to market? My former partner tried to steal it and pass it off as his own," Audrey stated simply. "He's planning to unveil a simplified, corrupted version of this design in 6 weeks to win the city's downtown redevelopment contract." Cole leaned forward, connecting the dots. "You're talking about Grant Covington?" Audrey nodded. "I've already filed for provisional patents on every key design element and technological innovation within this project. They were granted last week. Legally, it is mine and mine alone. Covington's project is built on a foundation of theft, and I have the evidence to prove it. When his company implodes, the city will still need a developer for that contract. I want that developer to be you, and I will be your lead architect." Cole Anderson stared at her, a mixture of shock and admiration on his face. He was looking at a massive, multi-billion-dollar opportunity, hand-delivered by a mysterious woman with a plan as audacious as her designs. "You're not just offering me a project," he said slowly. "You're inviting me to a public execution." "I'm offering you the chance to build the future," Audrey corrected him. "The fact that it requires tearing down a corrupt relic of the past is just a necessary part of the construction process." A slow, wolfish grin spread across Cole Anderson's face. "Tell me what you need from me." The trap was now fully designed. The journalist would provide the explosion. The competitor would seize the opportunity from the rubble. All the pieces were in place. All Audrey had to do now was play the loving wife for 6 more weeks and wait for the show to begin. The final 6 weeks before the Ethelgard unveiling were the most grueling test of Audrey's resolve. The air in the penthouse was thick with Grant's escalating arrogance and anxiety. He was a man on the precipice of what he believed would be his life's greatest victory, and the pressure made him volatile, one moment, effusively charming the next, snapping at the household staff over trivialities. Audrey was his calm, steadying anchor, a role she played with an Oscar-worthy performance. She helped him rehearse his speech, her face a mask of admiration. "It's wonderful, Grant," she'd say, "but maybe emphasize the community integration aspect a bit more in the introduction. It feels so personal to your vision." Each suggestion was a subtle trap, pushing him to more explicitly claim ownership of concepts she had documented as hers. He took every piece of bait, his ego too large to imagine she was doing anything other than adoring him. He was so consumed by his own impending glory that he failed to notice the subtle changes in his wife. He didn't see the cold resolve in her eyes, or the way her smile never quite reached them anymore. Behind the scenes, her coordination with her allies was relentless. She communicated with Victoria Finch and Cole Anderson through encrypted channels, meticulously planning every detail of the unveiling day. Victoria's team was preparing a bombshell video package, complete with graphics displaying the damning text messages, financial charts, and audio clips Audrey had managed to record of Grant on the phone with Bianca, laughing about his clueless wife. The Cole Andersons' legal team, meanwhile, was working with Audrey to prepare a formal presentation for the city council. They would be ready to step in with a fully patented, legally sound and far superior version of the Ethelgard project the moment Covington's bid was discredited. Cole had also begun quiet negotiations with the city's planning commission, priming them for a contingency plan should the Covington proposal encounter unforeseen legal complications. He was laying the groundwork for a seamless takeover. The greatest risk came a week before the event. Bianca Shaw, growing increasingly paranoid about being sidelined, ambushed Grant at a restaurant where he was having lunch with Audrey. She stormed up to their table, her face a mask of fury. "Grant, we need to talk. Now!" she hissed, ignoring Audrey completely. Grant's face went pale. "Bianca, this is not the time or the place. I've been calling you all week," she snapped. "You're about to present this project, and my name is nowhere on it. My father is about to cut me off completely. What was my share of this deal?" This was it. The moment of confrontation Audrey had dreaded. But instead of fear, she felt a surge of icy calm. She placed a gentle hand on Grant's arm, her expression one of utter confusion and concern. She turned to Bianca, her voice soft and wounded. "I'm sorry, I'm Audrey Grant's wife. Who are you?" The direct, innocent question threw Bianca completely off balance. Her rage faltered, replaced by a sneer. "Oh, please, don't play dumb. You know exactly who I am." Grant, seeing his world about to implode, finally found his voice. "Bianca, that's enough. You're making a scene." He turned to Audrey, his eyes pleading. "Darling, this is a disgruntled former business associate. She's delusional." Audrey looked from Grant's panicked face to Bianca's furious one. She let a single perfect tear roll down her cheek. "A business associate, Grant? She seems to think she has a claim on your project. On us?" She stood up, trembling slightly. "I think I need some air." With that, she turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Grant to deal with the mess. It was the perfect move. It positioned her as the victim, cemented Grant's narrative that Bianca was unstable, and allowed her to escape before her mask could slip. From a cafe across the street, she watched as Grant furiously bundled Bianca into a car before racing off. Later that evening, he came home with a 2-carat diamond bracelet and a story about a desperate ex-colleague trying to extort him. He groveled and apologized for the scene, for the stress it must have caused her. Audrey played her part, accepting the apology and the bracelet with tearful relief. "I trust you, Grant," she whispered, letting him hold her. I know you'd never betray me. As he held her smelling of expensive cologne and cheap lies, she felt nothing but the cold, hard weight of the trap about to spring. He had survived Bianca's outburst, and his confidence was now higher than ever. He believed he had successfully navigated the final hurdle. He was untouchable. The night before the unveiling, Grant stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. Tomorrow, he said, his eyes gleaming with triumph in the reflection. Tomorrow everything changes. They'll finally see what I'm capable of. Audrey stood behind him, her reflection beside his. Yes, they will, she said quietly. They're going to see everything. He mistook her quiet intensity for awe. He had no idea he was a dead man walking, and that the woman smiling placidly in the mirror was the one who had already signed his death warrant. The stage was set. The audience was waiting. The curtain was about to rise on the final act. The grand ballroom of the Sheraton City Center was buzzing with an electric anticipation. 300 of the city's most powerful figures, politicians, investors, media moguls, and real estate tycoons were gathered for the official unveiling of the Ethelgard arcology. It was the crowning moment of Grant Covington's career, the culmination of a multi-million-dollar marketing blitz that had promised to showcase not just a building, but the future of urban living. Giant screens flanked a sleek, modern stage, displaying the Covington Developments logo against an animated backdrop of a futuristic skyline. Waiters moved silently through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The air was thick with the scent of money and ambition. Audrey made her entrance on Grant's arm. She wore a striking emerald green dress, a color chosen to symbolize growth and new beginnings. It stood out in the sea of black and navy suits, drawing all eyes to her. To the outside world, she was the picture of a proud, supportive wife. Her smile was radiant, her posture poised. But beneath the silk fabric, her heart was a metronome, counting down the seconds with a steady, resolute beat. She spotted Bianca Shaw near the back of the room, looking sullen and furious. A glass of champagne held in a white-knuckled grip. Their eyes met for a moment, and Bianca offered a contemptuous sneer. Audrey simply gave her a small, enigmatic smile in return. In the front row, Audrey took her seat beside Grant's father, the stern patriarch, Harold Covington. "He'd better not mess this up," Harold grumbled, his gaze fixed on the stage. "Grant will be magnificent," Audrey replied, her voice filled with a convincing warmth. "This project is his entire world." A few rows back, she saw him Cole Anderson, looking calm and distinguished, giving her a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Across the room, disguised as a technician, was one of Victoria Finch's trusted cameramen, ensuring their planned feed could not be interrupted. Everything was in place. Finally, the lights dimmed. A slickly produced introductory video played, filled with dramatic music and sweeping shots of the city. Then the master of ceremonies took the stage. "And now, a man whose vision will shape the next century of our great city. The COO of Covington Developments, please welcome Mr. Grant Covington." Grant walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. He was in his element, bathed in the spotlight, his handsome face beaming with confidence. He looked out at the audience, his eyes finding Audrey's in the front row. He gave her a private, triumphant wink. She smiled back, a perfect, serene mask. For the next 20 minutes, Grant delivered the speech of his life. He spoke with passion and charisma about sustainability, community, and innovation. He used the very phrases Audrey had fed him, painting a vivid picture of his dream for the city. He was masterful, weaving a narrative of a visionary leader, single-handedly solving the problems of modern urban life. The audience was captivated. "But words can only do so much," Grant said, his voice building to a crescendo. "It's time to show you the future. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Ethelgard Arcology." He pressed a button on the podium, gesturing grandly to the massive screens behind him. This was the moment, the peak of his ascent. The renderings of his stolen dream were supposed to flash onto the screens, securing his legacy. But the screens didn't show gleaming towers. Instead, they flickered for a second and then resolved into a crisp, high-definition news broadcast studio. The familiar, serious face of Victoria Finch filled the screens, the logo for The Sentinel displayed prominently behind her. A confused murmur rippled through the ballroom. Grant froze, his smile faltering. He frantically tapped the button on the podium, but nothing happened. "Good afternoon," Victoria Finch's voice boomed through the ballroom sound system, clear and authoritative. "We interrupt this presentation for a special report. The story you are about to hear is one of ambition, betrayal, and audacious fraud. It's the story of the Ethelgard Arcology, or rather the story of the woman whose brilliant work was stolen to create it." A collective gasp went through the audience. Grant's face had turned ashen. He stared horrified at the screens, then shot a panicked look at the tech booth, but the technicians seemed just as confused as he was. "For the past 2 years," Finch continued, "Grant Covington has been lauded as a visionary. But the Sentinel has acquired irrefutable evidence, proving that the entire Ethelgard concept, from its core philosophy to its key architectural designs, was stolen from his wife, renowned MIT graduate and architect Audrey Jensen." The screens behind Finch then split. On one side, Audrey's original MIT thesis blueprints appeared dated full 3 years ago. On the other, Grant's official project files. The similarities were undeniable. Then the most damning evidence of all began to scroll across the screen, the text messages from the burner phone between Grant and Bianca Shaw. Grant. She has no idea her little pet project from MIT is about to make me CEO. Bianca. And after you secure the contract, what about your sweet, brilliant wife, Grant? She'll be a rich divorcee, a necessary and very temporary inconvenience. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Bianca Shaw dropped her champagne glass, which shattered on the floor. Harold Covington had risen halfway out of his seat, his face purple with rage, staring at his son with utter disbelief. But the demolition wasn't over. An audio file began to play, Grant's voice filling the hall captured from a phone call he'd made in their apartment. "Of course she bought it. She's smart, but she's naive. Thinks this whole thing is a team effort. She'll be devastated when I leave, but that's what the Covington lawyers are for." Grant stood on the stage, paralyzed, a statue of humiliation. The spotlight that had been his coronation was now an interrogation lamp. He looked wildly out at the sea of faces that were once filled with admiration, now stared back with contempt and disgust. His eyes finally landed on Audrey. She was still sitting in the front row, her hands folded calmly in her lap. The serene, supportive smile was gone. In its place was a look of cold, quiet judgment. In that moment, he finally understood. This wasn't a technical glitch. This wasn't an attack from a rival. This was her. His naive, trusting wife had orchestrated his public execution with the precision of a master architect. The carefully constructed facade of his life, his career, and his future had just been brought down in a controlled demolition, and everyone he had ever wanted to impress was there to witness it. As Grant stood frozen on stage, the architect of his own ruin, the ballroom doors at the back of the room opened. A new figure walked calmly and purposefully down the central aisle. Cole Anderson. He moved with an air of quiet authority, that immediately drew the attention of the stunned crowd. He didn't approach the stage, but stopped beside the front row, turning to address the city council members and key investors who were huddled together in a state of shock. "My name is Cole Anderson, CEO of Anderson Realty Group," he announced, his voice steady and clear, a stark contrast to the chaos. "What you have just witnessed is a clear case of intellectual property theft. However, the city's need for a forward-thinking downtown development remains." He gestured toward the stage, not at Grant, but at the screens where Victoria Finch was now wrapping up her report. "The vision for the Ethelgard arcology is brilliant. It is revolutionary, and it belongs to its true creator." Cole turned and extended a hand toward Audrey. "I'd like to introduce you all to my firm's new lead partner and the chief architect of the real Ethelgard project, Ms. Audrey Jensen." A wave of murmurs turned into a roar of astonishment. Slowly, gracefully, Audrey rose from her seat. She took Cole's hand, a silent transfer of power, witnessed by all. She was no longer the betrayed wife in the front row. She was the commander on the battlefield, surveying her victory. She walked onto the stage, stopping a few feet from her paralyzed husband. She took the microphone from the podium, her movements deliberate. The room fell into a dead silence. She didn't look at Grant. She looked out at the audience, at the people whose respect he had tried to steal for himself. The Ethelgard arcology was never about one man's ambition, she said, her voice resonating with a strength no one in that room knew she possessed. It was about building a better future, a sustainable community where people and nature can coexist. It was a dream based on integrity, innovation, and respect, principles my husband clearly does not understand. She finally turned her head and looked directly at Grant. His face was a mask of disbelief and primal terror. He saw her now, truly saw her for the first time, not as an accessory or a tool, but as the formidable force that had just dismantled his entire world. "You didn't just steal my designs, Grant," she said, her voice dropping to a low, cutting tone that only those nearby could hear. "You underestimated the architect." With that, she turned her back on him and addressed the city council members directly. "Mr. Mayor, council members, Anderson Realty Group, with the full legal and patented rights to the authentic Ethelgard designs, is prepared to submit our official proposal by the end of the day. We can break ground within 6 months." The mayor, seeing a political and economic disaster turning into a miraculous recovery, stood up and began to applaud. Others, sensing the shift in power, quickly joined in. The applause grew from a scattered clapping to a thunderous ovation, not for the fraud who stood broken on the stage, but for the brilliant woman who had reclaimed her destiny. Security finally came to escort a catatonic Grant off the stage. His father, Harold Covington, didn't even look at him. He simply stared at Audrey with a mixture of horror and grudging respect, before turning and walking out of the ballroom, the patriarch of a fallen empire. Bianca Shaw had already vanished a ghost at the scene of a crime, her own social and professional future in tatters. In the aftermath, the collapse was swift and total. The Covington development stock plummeted into oblivion overnight. Investors pulled out, lawsuits piled up, and within a month, the company filed for bankruptcy. Grant Covington, facing multiple fraud charges and disowned by his family, became a social pariah, his name synonymous with disgrace. Audrey, however, flourished. She filed for divorce the very next day. Free from the weight of her secret, she poured all her energy into her work with Cole Anderson. Their partnership was dynamic and respectful. They didn't just build their Ethelgard arcology. They improved upon it, creating a landmark that became a global model for sustainable architecture. Months later, Audrey stood on the construction site of her rising masterpiece, the wind whipping through her hair. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed me." She recognized it was from Grant. She looked at the message for a moment, then at the soaring steel skeleton of the tower in front of her, a monument to her resilience and her genius. She didn't feel anger or even pity. She felt nothing at all for him. He was a part of a past she had demolished to build her future. She deleted the message without replying and turned her face toward the sun, a genuine, radiant smile spreading across her lips. The payback was complete. But it was never just about revenge. It was about reclamation. She had taken back her name, her work, and her future, building an empire of her own, not on a foundation of lies, but on a bedrock of unbreakable strength. Audrey's story is a powerful reminder that the deepest betrayals can often ignite the fiercest strength within us. She transformed her pain, not into bitter hatred, but into a meticulously crafted plan for justice. She didn't just get even. She rose above reclaiming her stolen dreams and building a future on her own terms. Her victory wasn't just in exposing a lie, but in revealing her own undeniable truth and brilliance to the world. She proved that the most formidable structures aren't built of steel and glass, but of courage, intellect, and an unbreakable will. What did you think of Audrey's incredible payback? Was it the perfect revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of justice and empowerment, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of incredible twists and triumphs. Thank you for watching.